In our religion, it has got lost in translation. People say, oh, that's in the Old Testament, this is the New Testament, and things like that. There are some high-valued men in the Bible that had a lot of favor from God by having multiple wives and multiple concubines. So you can't sit up here and say you want a man of God and not acknowledge the fact that, oh, in this society it's socially accepted, but in the Bible, when you talk about David, when you talk about Solomon, the wisest person in all of earth, he had the most wives anybody has ever had, and concubines.
I wanted to ask about polygyny. And I say polygyny because there's polygamy, polyamory, but polygyny is a man having more than one wife. And this was done by people like Solomon and David, some of the best of the best. This was done by, and for myself, I don't know where the Bible says that it's sinful to do that, Old or New Testament, or maybe I overlooked something. So I want to know,
That's always a man's question.
Yeah, I want to know from y'all your thoughts on that.
One, let me just ask you, why?
That's good.
Okay. For me,
I want more than one.
Yeah, you know why? I don't know. I'm trying to find a way to say it that's kind of like soothing to the ears.
No, not here. Don't do that here.
I mean, I can't. So basically.
Okay, I get it. So one, it seems to be, right, a male appetite in the scriptures from some of the big homies in the scriptures, the Hall of Famers. But what seems to follow, though, on a practical level, and we can get to the theology of it, the Bible answer of it, but one of the things you'll always see is trouble follows. Disruption, lack of peace, jealousy among, the women participants. So it doesn't seem to be a course that leads to the perceived happiness. You know what I mean? So I can see on the face of it, it seems like a fantasy for the male conscious, right? So on the face of it, I think I get it. Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines.
We know that, because I don't know nothing else in the Bible.
Correction, 300
I don't even know what's that 300 side pieces? What concubines is. But even his conclusion was, it's all vanity, right? So he, as the king, having access to women all across the known world, still his conclusion is, there's an emptiness there. It didn't bring what I imagined as he explored and found interest in all these different looks and different, biological physiology. He still ended at the place of, I need something else. You know what I mean?
And then we find a way in a situation where we talk about relationships in this day and time and not knowing the realization that the Bible has always been a place where everybody wasn't always married to one wife. Hell, I think a lot of people have to understand this too. Everybody in the Bible wasn't even married.
So I would say, because when we see sometimes in the Old Testament, we see two things. We see descriptive and prescriptive. And so when you see Solomon and David having multiple wives, that's describing what happens, but that's not prescriptive that we should duplicate those things. So like, case in point, David murdered someone. He raped Bathsheba. Just because it's described doesn't mean it's prescribed. And so we can't look at the Old Testament and say, well, they did in the Old Testament. It's just describing what happened because the Bible is full of different genres. So sometimes it's telling a story, sometimes it's giving instructions, sometimes it's poetry. So I think looking at that context, not looking all the time at the text and saying, he had multiple wives, so God is okay with it, then that would lead us down a rabbit hole of other things that we don't want to emulate. And so navigating what's descriptive and prescriptive is key in thinking through the text as well.
I mean, for the Bible to be so direct, right? I've always stood on this principle. Not to say that I believe in cheating, not to say I believe in polygamy relationships, not to say all that. I'm saying this just for the sake of conversation. It never said one wife. For it to be so specific, it said a wife.
Just because the Bible records it doesn't mean that he endorses it.
Yeah.
And I think that's critical too. And that's to Lisa's point. And I would just add that appealing to Jesus is always something that kind of helps us to establish foundation for many things, right? We come back to him as the final authority on all things pertaining to this life and the one that is to come. And when you look at the discourse or the dialogue between Jesus and the disciples concerning marriage and divorce, in Matthew 19 it says, and he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, to Flame's point. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. And so I think that what Jesus is doing is, number one, Jesus is appealing to the Old Testament. But what he's appealing to, he's not appealing to the life of David or the life of Solomon. What he's appealing to is God's ideal from the beginning. Because everything that precedes Genesis 3, which is the fall of man, would be the ideal of God. What was it that God intended from the beginning? You see what I mean? What that helps us to do is establish a groundwork. It helps us to establish a foundation, and that's what Jesus seems to appeal to. He could have very well appealed to one of the other patriarchs. Instead, he appealed to God's ideal. Remember back when God, he said, have you not read when God the Father said that the two become one, and that whatever he has joined together? You see what I mean? And so I think that having an understanding of, asking the question first, God, what is your ideal? And searching for that to establish foundation is critical to having these kind of conversations that can get murky and gray.